to this part because the focus, or the emphasis will be on the gate here. And so I'm just quickly kind of sketching out some lines or textures or patterns on this. They're entirely optional, but I'm mostly looking for right now a solid kind of silhouette to see if that'll work in a more interesting kind of way. But I'm not going to do anything crazy or time consuming for this. If you have a stronger imagination, you want to add more and more elements to this, that is fine. This is supposed to here represent a little bit of the ground. I want to firmly kind of place it in a kind of like a desert type of situation. I'll have some kind of drawbridge going over something to it. And I'll just kind of make this small so I can more or less just kind of hint at that temple or that pyramid that it's supposed to be at the base at, just to show more contextual elements. So if you can add more of these kind of contextual elements to where it's going to in the world that it's set in, that's always better. Though not entirely necessary. I may or may not make a comment on it depending how clear the design is. And so now I'm going to begin to sketch out the final kind of quick, or the final concept of that. So I'm using some basic perspective brushes that you can download from the resources, and I'm just kind of blocking in a perspective. So sometimes your image will only be as interesting as well as your perspective, as interesting as your perspective is. So I'm going to do something, a little dynamic, nothing crazy. I have 2-point perspective, and I usually like a safe bet is to do 1 point inside and 1 point outside the actual kind of box. So and that's why I switched up to this kind of format where I can show you the boxes, so I can show you how far the sketch goes out. And I'm going to solidify by first finding out your horizon line. So when you're doing your perspective and mapping everything out, figure out, are you looking up at your scene or are you looking down into your scene? Are you more or less at eye level? And that will adjust, how high that horizon line is. I want to be looking at an eye level, more or less looking up at it, so I'm going to go with a lower horizon line. And if you want to look down from atop something, looking into the city or into your gate, whatever structure you're drawing, then you want to use a higher perspective line. Or horizon line, not perspective line. And with the green, I quickly suggested a lightly suggested a 3-point perspective, just to make it a little bit more natural looking. Things can look a little stiff if you kind of always just go with a flat or straight 2-point perspective. So I'm just trying to find the major towers that I sketched out into the scene. I'm not necessarily caring at this point whether or not the whole sketch fits within here. I just want to focus on the entryway. And so I'm basically using the rule of thirds and some big, medium, small shapes, everything we've kind of talked about, to block out these forms. I just know I want that main gate to kind of rest at 1/3 of the image, or slightly off center even, on the left here that I have this my crosshair at right now. Alright, so I'm just kind of adjusting this. I want it to kind of align with the grid I'm drawing up a little bit. And I'm trying to make it just as interesting as I can with, the design I kind of went with and the angle. So I can lightly suggest some of these vertical shapes, the horizontal ones. But I'm quickly kind of boxing it in. It never, at least not for me, it may for some of you depending on your technique and your experience. My first sketches like this, they never look nice and clean. They never look at a level of that I present things. So again, I'll be looking at, with your assignments, we'll be looking kind of at things in 3 levels. We'll be looking at both your design in terms of the what you actually drew. We'll be looking at your technique. How well did you draw something, and then overall the presentation level of everything. Is it clean? Could you show this to a client? Could you show it to me? I want you to be proud of what you do, what you turn in and kind of work on each week. And I think that's just such a huge part of it, is to be give everything your best. If you've never drawn before, it's going to take you maybe a couple more weeks to kind of get there than others. But this is a class for everybody, and I want you to first and foremost have fun, to kind of take in some new information, and then try to apply that. And then if you have time, of course, you can go back and make things look nicer. I rather, if anything, you go for quality over quantity. Sometimes some of the assignments can seem or feel like a lot. If you just don't have the time that week, then focus on making something a lot nicer than trying to get every little bullet point done. So I'm still breaking up these main kind of cubes, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. Is I'm just blocking or boxing things out in a very geometrical way to see if I can make sense of it. This three-dimensional scene in a two-dimensional space. That's all we ever do with perspective, really, and color and value. All those other things we'll be talking about in the coming weeks. But for today and for this lesson, we're going to stay with a simple drawing, and hopefully it'll be readable. We'll get our idea across. If there's anything, and I'll repeat this maybe every other week or every week, we'll see. The one thing you absolutely want to take away from this course in general is that your design has to be clear. The intention has to be clear with it, and it has to be readable and presentable to your clients, and to anyone you want to show it to. You don't want to hand in anything too sloppy or loose. So really, this week, what I wanted to first do with this is basically the intro to architecture design. With those are the two main primary aspects of this course, both architecture and design as a whole. And I wanna just show you this first week a brief overview or introductory process to what I personally define that design process to be. And the first thing, and and you can check the reference sheet in the downloads this week regarding all of this. But the first thing we want to do as concept artists, as designers, is define what that problem is. That doesn't always have to be a problem. You want to define the goal or the outcome in terms of basically the intent of this piece of art that we're doing each week. I more or less kind of do that, or at least guideline you to do that each week, so you always don't have to kind of take that into consideration. I mean, you'll have some options, but that's the first thing we always want to do, and will often dictate the entire course or outcome of what that given image or the assignment or that task is for each week. So knowing what you want to do, what the problem is you're trying to solve or design, and basically the outcome being what should your finish be aiming to accomplish. So the first part of course, that once defining what you can do or what you can't do, is to think of the forms and the functions of your given architecture. Is it a temple? Is it a place of worship? Is it a place of sacrifice? Is it a place where the gods come to rest? Is it a sanctuary? If you think of what your temple is designed, or what your architecture is designed to do, the form can supplement that. If it's a fortress garrison, it's going to have high fortified walls, maybe places for weaponry. Everything is, of course, dictated and designed by what that form and the function. So if I'm giving you some of the problems to solve each week and not all the restraints, decide upon yourself what kind of restraints you will give yourself. Creativity is often derived from the restraints we put on ourselves. Okay, I'm going to do some architecture that is, restricted to this style or this period or this culture, and I'm not going to have any magical elements, or maybe I will have magical elements. Maybe what is my level of technology? But defining what your restraints are for the design can dictate, how much creativity you can derive from it. And often, the more creative we are, is wholly resulted from how much restraints are put on us from the get-go. So defining all that, I think, is really important before you begin each week. Taking your own personal notes on what you're going to do and what you can't do. So once everything is defined, in terms of problems and goals and outcomes, the second thing would be to collect your information. This is where you either watch my video, I provide the reference information, you do your own referencing, of course, and deciding, okay, what are we going to reference for this particular design? Is it nature itself? Is it certain specific everyday objects? Is it people and culture? Is it certain aspects of history? you can reference anything and implement them into your design solutions. So this is where you want to take notes and maybe do a few quick sketches on what your idea may be. The third thing, of course, would be the technique, and this is what you plan on creating. Develop your solutions through sketching, concepting, and we do a lot of this each week. You'll see. But of course, are we going to draw versus are we going to paint? We just want to get the idea out of our head, and that's more or less what I did in the sketch before this. And now what I'm doing is taking what I liked and what I didn't like and improving upon and expanding upon that. And that's the fourth thing, and that's basically improvement and presentation in the design process. We want to, as designers, we often have to sell somebody or an audience on our idea. And so that presentation really kind of plays into that, and how, in the clarity, as I had mentioned previously, the clarity of that design is at stake here. So we have to put a lot of effort into that, as much, if not as least, into the design itself. And so, yeah, I just wanted to, again, give you a brief overview of what I really will be looking for and what you should be thinking about in terms of techniques, and you're getting you into the right mindset before you even begin to sit down and draw basically an assignment. And I think that'll really help. But, in terms of goals and you personally, you're going to have to define for yourself what that measure of success will be within the image. Where are you at? Where are you coming from with this course? Where do you aim to go with your work? And you're going to have to hold yourself accountable to those standards. I can just simply help guide you there and do my best to keep you accountable. So, like I mentioned in the letter, tell me each week what your intent is. When you can submit a comment with the assignment, I want to know what you aim to do, and so I can help you hold accountable for what you're trying to do. Because if we're not held accountable to anybody or something, we can tend to slack off, or we can go off, be derailed rather easily. Yeah, I'm thinking right here, design-wise, I want some old sculpture, temple, or relief, to be on the temple here. Some symbol of their god, or maybe somebody that's hiding some ancient power within that pyramid that I have to figure out the scale of and draw behind this kind of gateway city here. And that's kind of playing into the next point that's entirely separate but still loosely connected, is what is the story with this image that I'm trying to tell. I think ultimately at the end of the day, your drawing, your concept, your design, besides the more technical aspect of it, which I just created those 5 points, more artistically speaking, of course, I'm trying to figure out what is the story of this design, of this image that I'm drawing. Because we're all visual storytellers. That's why we look to draw. That's why we look to paint, because we have some sort of story to show or tell. That the image can basically be self-contained in that. So I'm trying to think of the history of this place, who it serves, what it's built for, and more about the people and the culture. And so the more, you don't literally have to really figure all that out each week, but I can guarantee you, the more you can understand about what you're drawing in terms of its story, what story you're trying to show, where's the history, what is the culture, all those sort of things play in. Who is the god or the ruler that this is serving? Is it meant to protect a certain people from some kind of vicious monster? Is it housing an alien ancient artifact sort of thing? The more you can think about the story and what you want to show with your image, I guarantee you the better it will become. And that's just another thing to think about each week when we're kind of going through these. Because if you're getting into the story, you're getting into the drawing, and you're not always getting caught up, and that's the disclaimer I want to show is, well, don't always get caught up in the technique of this. Focus on the story and the idea just as much in terms of how nice you're drawing. And I say drawing nicely is a huge part of that, but I think that'll kind of come more, more with time. It'll come more when you get into the groove in terms of that mental state, that you're really of focus when you're drawing your things. If you're really mentally projecting yourself into your scenes and what in into your design, you'll kind of get into it more. You'll lose track of time. You'll start asking yourselves all these questions about the story and the place that you're trying to draw or design, and I think it'll all be that much more enriched from it. So, the other thing too with these designs that I cover more specifically in week 2 is the pattern language. So, spoiler alert, that's what's going to happen next week. And I'm thinking of different ways I can segment this structure, draw patterns in it, and have a lot of elements repeat. If we're constantly changing the shapes or the patterns and basically the languages of the shape, the internal shapes within the silhouette, if we're constantly changing that without any sort of rules or repetition, it's going to not look cohesive. So we want to make things look cohesive by having certain elements, motifs, and aesthetics repeat themselves. So again, another thing that I'd love to just make you guys aware of when you're drawing out your scenes. And on the note on the drawing itself right now, this is I would consider that mid-level shot. I think we talk more about this in week 3. But just as a heads up, decide when you're drawing your scene if you're going to do A close-up, B, a mid-shot, which this is, or C, more or less an establishing or a long shot, something that's zoomed even further out. I definitely recommend kind of sticking with the one or the A or the B in this case, so we can see some of the architectural details. Generally, if we go with option C, which is the establishing shot, we're only going to see faint silhouettes, lots of atmosphere, and that sort of thing. So we got to keep the focus, I think, more on the architecture, not so much on the world. The world building aspect would be if we did go with the C. If you can blow through your assignment and you do A or B, and you want to do a C, to supplement it, by all means, go for it. I don't want to hold you back. So hopefully, when I'm drawing these things, I have that plan set out, the technology level, the culture, everything. I'm hoping that this action that I'm taking with this design, it should, supplement all of that. So everything is kind of interconnected and intertwined and tied and goes, from one thing to another, whether it's a principle of art or it's a design aesthetic. They all kind of go hand in hand. Whether what your personal philosophies are in terms of creativity, it all play into each other. But don't necessarily worry about your style and stuff. I want you to just take in the information, have fun coming up with a fun design. For example, what I've done here is definitely kind of played things very safe. If you want to use like a motif of like some kind of ancient fish or giant beast and integrate claw designs or feathers or it's some kind of head or cat-esque element, whatever you like, and you want to put that into your design, by all means go for it. In fact, I'll call myself lame that I played things so safe with this, but I just wanted to kind of show you a very baseline assignment and leaving some room for creativity with it on your end as well. Right now, I'm just trying to make everything look kind of consistent. I'm of course turning the perspective grid on and off, and this is at the stage where I'm finally going in and cleaning up a little bit of the lines and figuring out what some of those details. So again, this would be part 4 of my personal design process, and that's seeing what works, what doesn't work, and trying to just fine tune the overall aesthetics of it. Adding little patterns. They're all very simple and geometric, so I'm using the pointed triangle a lot and basically like that kind of rhombus shape with it as a supplemental element with it. So things are very pointy within this architectural style I'm doing, and not very round. They're not. It's not even very kind of square or squat. I'm not making a very bold design. I'm keeping things a little more sharp, angular, and yeah, just kind of going with things based off that angle. And of course, once I draw one thing like I did on the right, I started over there, I can just use that as a baseline to kind of compare and figure out what the rest of the design looks like throughout the rest of the building. I'm also trying to not make things too complicated too soon. I'm trying to leave areas that are more simple versus areas that are more complex. That's areas of rest, and that's just a great design aesthetic to go with altogether, and to keep in mind, for the viewer's eye. We don't want to just bombard the viewer or the boss, whoever we're doing these for, with just crazy details for the sake of their details. Everything should be a little bit planned out, to say the least. So I have like a gateway, a corridor going down here with different kind of pillars, and yeah, basically that'll be a huge thing. What I haven't really established yet in this, and I'll do at the very end, is that sense of scale. And that's another important thing to make sure you keep track of with these designs too. Is what is the scale of this? The other important thing to look at too is always, if I start off very square, basic, and geometrical, even if the architecture lends itself to that like this, I'm always finding ways to break up the large shapes, adding, I'm pushing and pulling from those kind of baseline squares and rectangles I started to make the shapes overlap and interesting and extrude and retract in various places. And so now I wanted to take a moment to kind of show you some mid-progress shots and kind of the evolution of what I've been showing you. I wrote some quick notes. As you may have observed, the first stage, as we did here, was the blockout, the rough blockout. If you turn in something that's more along the lines represents this, that's kind of the feedback I'll be giving. It's too rough. It is too hard. Clean it up a bit, those sort of things. And so the second thing I really like to do once I have something like this is clean it up. And that's what I did a lot here. And so this is very just kind of clean up sketch. And I think that works fine. If that's all you want to do, then that's fine by me. What I'm doing now is actually I'm just softening up this just a little bit, so I can go back and just add a little bit of shading in areas underneath the sketch, and maybe like even a little on top, just to get some of that contrast out, to really kind of pick apart some of the textures or design patterns. But nothing crazy. I'm not going to do some full rendered drawing or even concept sketch. I'm just kind of just adding a little bit of flavor on top of the cake. Think of it that way. And that's really, in a sense, it's beyond articulating the details. What I had before that had all the details in the world that we needed to articulate. So I'm just kind of finessing and finishing things up. So if you have that skill set, or you want to try that even, go for it. It's entirely optional. It's also worth noting on this particular sketch file that I have, as I mentioned, I just keep 4 panels, so I can do 4 sketches, but I've kind of just spread some of my resources out just to illustrate to you guys. Not that I always have these out here like this, but usually they're off to the side on a separate file. But I have a few key kind of images I'm looking at for inspiration in terms of this. We've already kind of established a lot of it, but this is the kind of thing I look at. Like in here, these details are kind of pointing out to the little things I have up in here and on these kind of corners, and maybe some of the in-between areas. That's kind of the contrast and the detail I'm looking at in regards to that. I'm looking at this for the kind of like the grandness and the scale, maybe a little bit of the mood. and a little bit even of the composition. I'm just trying to reimagine things and have them suit to my designs and needs. But they're kind of just there. See, they're supporting me. If my main fight here with this image is me battling, up against trying to get this completed, this is my support team in the corner that they just kind of keep reassuring me of things, and they boost my confidence just having these actually out and within view. I just wanted to make a quick note of that as well. So just as a brief overview before we conclude this week, you want to start off what your design parameters are, your questions, what you want to solve, your goals, your outcomes. You figure that out with your silhouette designs and your shapes. Figure out then you can derive your focal point from that. So what am I going to focus on? And of course, what angle you want to show, what your horizon line is going to be. Solve these things first, then go out to sketch it out, and then you can finalize your sketch. But that's what you should be aiming and looking to do throughout the homework this week, all right? So take care.